As you can see, we've got a double knot block. It's lower layers. I've already removed part of the matrix just to make sure that the Nautilus is complete, and we're not going to get halfway through the video and there's nothing left. The two tools I'll basically be using today, an American CP and an arrow air pen. Both of these pens have been adapted for fossil preparation. The block itself does have several, well, 2 or 3 problems. There is a fracture through the main part of the larger Nautilus outer chamber. Also, we have quite a large area of calcite shell missing, which can be replaced or repaired. We have quite a large calcite inclusion along this edge, which is running up into the smaller Nautilus at the top. There are also some veins of calcite, as you can see, running through and into the Nautilus. There's one large one here and a large one here. While doing the first bit of prep, we also found a small juvenile Nautilus there, which I would like to keep if possible, remembering that we have to bring this edge quite a ways back to expose the keel of the Nautilus. Basically, I'm removing this area of matrix first to expose more of the keel. I'm using the American CP pen because it's more powerful and faster, and there is quite a lot of matrix to remove. The rubber on the pen is basically just to stop a little bit of the vibration that you get from these tools. I'm going to work this area down slowly and round so I can actually get to the point where the keel starts to curve over. Then we'll probably move round to the other side. As you can see, the pen does remove the matrix quite easily. There is actually a calcite vein here which is quite hard, but the pen doesn't really struggle that, it will remove it. We're probably about 40 minutes into this now. As you can see, the rock's coming away nicely. There's some remains of 1 or 2 belemnites in there which I shall remove. There was part of a shell here which I wasn't quite sure what it was until I exposed a lot more of it. It slowed me down a little bit. It turned out to be just basically a shell, not another Nautilus. Right, one thing I did forget to mention before we started all this is PPE. Always remember, this dust can be harmful. You need to wear a dust mask, and preferably some sort of protection for your eyes. I have some glasses that I normally wear which actually protect my eyes as well, and I normally work under magnifying light like this, so there's not much chance of me getting anything in my eyes. But it is very important that you do wear some sort of respirator or mask like this. This I consider good enough for this type of rock. If I was working on some of the North Yorkshire rock, which contains a lot of pyrite, then I would wear a proper filtered respirator, because that stuff can be very nasty. Now we've exposed a bit more around here. I'm now going to fetch this area here down to meet it from around the mouth of the Nautilus. We're going to take some of this matrix away and hopefully lower the profile here a little bit. more or less a good couple of hours work on that for the moment. I'll just blow this. That's better, you can see a little bit better now. We've brought this down now slowly, and all this will even come down further. What you've got to be careful of when you're cutting down the side of an ammonite is the thickness of the block. You know, just to make sure that there is enough thickness there for you to actually come down past the keel. But basically, we're started now, so I shan't be filming every little minute, obviously, because there will be a few hours work, probably about 15-20 hours work on this, so it's impractical to film every little bit. One of the questions I've been asked by Andy from the forum is, how am I going to finish the ammonite? What sort of finish am I going to apply? I really can't tell at this stage. It all depends on how the repair goes, and basically what I find when I clean the shell up with the air abrasive. What I would normally use is paraloid B72, which is basically a liquid that you paint on. To buy paraloid B72, it comes normally in a crystalline form, like so. You then mix this with acetone to the desired, well, basically to the desired effect that you want. The more of the crystals you mix to the acetone, the deeper gloss the finish will be. It's basically a plastic, this, and the acetone dissolves it, so what you're basically doing is you're putting a plastic coating on whatever you coat. When you get to about 50-50 on mixing this with acetone, and you're actually at the stage where you've got glue, you can actually repair and stick items together, provided not too large, obviously. And the repair is also removable, because you can dissolve the glue by the application of pure acetone, which means that you can take it apart without damaging it. I had another question from Tom on the forum regarding the calcite shell and how we prepare it without damaging it. As you can see on this particular Nautilus, the calcite shell is fairly thick. What we would do normally around here, where it is actually damaged, to stop this breaking away anymore while we're working on it, is we simply pour super glue into it. This will bond any loose calcite to the back matrix and should prevent any large pieces from coming away again while you're working near it with a pen, although it's not 100% foolproof. The main problem working around the calcite in this particular Nautilus is about the last ½ inch of the matrix around the Nautilus that's actually touching the Nautilus in places on the block, is that it's a very soft grey material. It's what we call sticky. Basically it sticks to the shell, and if you put a pen into it, the pen basically sinks into it like it's mud, and it doesn't ping the bits off. The way I get around this is by using my Arrow ST pen, and I skim along the shell of the Nautilus, removing it. It's the best way I've found to do it. You have to be careful because you're working close to the shell with your point. What you normally do is the angle of the point there, you would normally rest parallel on the shell and then work from side to side like so. If I just switch this pen on a minute, I don't know if we've got any air. And you can actually work like this. That will basically remove the matrix. You'll be left with still a very small amount of matrix,
in the pores of the calcite, but this is removed later on when you actually blast or use your air abrasive on the outer calcite shell. It will clean this away. Well, hopefully it will anyway. As you can see, since the last video we've progressed a little bit further on. We've actually expanded the penwork here. This part of the block was quite up and down. What we're trying to do is level it out so we get a nice smooth line running into the Nautilus. There's still quite a bit of work to do here. The main problem around this area was this fissure is actually opened up a little bit, but it's nothing major at the moment. It has been glued and hopefully that will hold it. If it tends, as I remove the matrix and it tends to grow wider, I may actually apply some resin to that. I've actually ground this part away briefly so you can have a look. This calcite vein that runs down actually run into the Nautilus shell here, and also split and run through into the softer browner matrix. The way to remove that was by the Arrow ST pen, by again skimming down the shell and actually cutting through the vein, which is basically what you can see here. It leaves quite a smooth finish, and we can come back to that later. I've already made a start on the back here just to save a little bit of time. We've worked down from the edge of the calcite here, and we're lowering the matrix on the top edge now, and today we're going to bring this round here a little bit and work this down, try and blend it in, all the matrix in, so it's nice and smooth, it flows. This is the top of the block, and I've already made a little bit of a start here. We've worked down from the calcite edge of the Nautilus and we're exposing part of the flatter keel on the back of the Nautilus. This obviously will have to go right round to the lower part, so the next main piece is we're going to work on this section here, remove this, take it back a little bit lower. You can actually see the rock here where it was quite sticky, and you can see all the grey stuck to the outer side where it's been penned away. I say the air abrasive will clean that up hopefully later. Just to speed things up a little bit, because we've got quite a lot of matrix to remove, I'm actually using quite a powerful air chisel here. It's a marble carver's air chisel from Italy. Basically I don't really want to run this a lot while the camera's in action, because it chucks a lot of dust and muck about and is extremely noisy. Just give you a little test. As you can see by that, very effective but very noisy, makes a lot of mess. So, mess all over. I'm going to try and remove this area down here now with the Italian chisel, which I won't film. Basically, you can see what's being done, and it is a bit messy. I can't risk the dust on the camera, really. Well, as you can see, that's a quite short work of that. Take my mask off. I think next what we're going to do is put the TT pen back on, and we're going to work this area. It's quite a difficult sticky area, and see if we can get this keel exposed a bit more, then smooth out these surfaces a bit, probably give them a little bit more shape so it all flows. Bring this front edge down a little bit here. Right, so take this back edge down. Okay, just to prove that I am actually tracking along the keel and not going off target, I've just cleaned this little bit here and here with air abrasive. As you can see the calcite just under this very small fragment of matrix that's left. So we are following the true line of the shell. Something else I've done since we filmed last time is I've actually ground this little pedestal that the small juvenile Nautilus is on to allow me a little bit of access down the back. This will be reduced eventually, finally, on the final grind, but I still need to get a little bit more depth here and here, which is going to be a little bit tricky with this Nautilus being here, the juvenile, but we'll see what we can do about that. And then we're going to smooth pen this out a bit more. Still a little bit levelling out. Got to still work on the profile around here a bit on the matrix. We still need to get this a little bit deeper, but hopefully I'll have that done before we start the next video, and then we'll get this ground down, smooth round. We'll have a look at the top Nautilus then. It has one or two little problems. It does need a repair here. The Nautilus itself was obviously a lot larger. You can see part of the outer wheels that run down into the matrix there. The problem you get with this, when the Nautilus has been reduced, is you have the outer calcite shell of basically that part of the Nautilus, and where the whale comes round again, you have the outside shell of that, and they touch. And basically what happens during fossilisation, these two bond together as a thick layer of calcite. So when you knock off what you think is the outer shell, you're still left with part of it on the inner shell, which lends you to think that the Nautilus is misshapen. What you have to do is remove some of this calcite with the pen and find the proper shape of the Nautilus, bring it back. But we'll sort that out in the future. As you can see, I've done quite a bit more pen work on the block. Taking this side down fairly deeper, and also this side a little bit. We do have problems basically with the larger Nautilus with the calcite Turn it around a little bit more so you can see. As I follow the edge of the outer keel around here, you can see that the calcite hasn't actually formed properly around the keel of the shell. It's very patchy. This isn't damage. This is just the way it's formed. You can see where I've removed the rock that basically there's no calcite there. It tends to end around about here and become patchy here. That was probably like that originally, and the keel has just lost the calcite, not formed correctly. Turn the block back a bit more. You can see I've taken the pedestal back even further and reduced it in size, and we've now got down the back here. This has been taken a little bit more, but we seem to be losing the calcite. I daren't take it anymore because under this vein here which runs into the side, because I don't think the calcite is there on the shell. We've cleaned up round the smaller Nautilus. You can see here we've come round and we've been having a look. We've been tracing with the pen. We've followed the true line of this part of the shell down. As you can see, it comes down and round, and we've picked the middle up. So a lot of this here is actually calcite from the shell that actually went round the top of it, and will have to be removed to get the true shape of this part of the Nautilus. That will probably be the next job. When cleaning the Nautilus centres, you do need a larger needle like so. They are quite deep. The way I clean it is basically to pick up this part of the outer whale, then skim down and follow it round. Can be quite tricky and quite difficult due to the depth of the centres on these. I've propped the block up, as you can see, so I can try and film a little bit of this, but unfortunately we're working in quite an enclosed area. I don't know whether all you're going to see is my hand, but we'll give it a go anyway. I'm back to the Arrow ST pen. As you can see, the needle does quite easily follow the profile of the whale, but now I'm going to have to turn the block vertically because it's very difficult to work like this, I'm afraid. Right, unfortunately the Nautilus centre wasn't quite complete, but most of it is there. At the minute I'm following the line of the Nautilus round and removing the excess calcite to bring the shape back. We're doing again we're doing this again with the ST pen. can see there, it's coming out quite easily. There's a little bit of work on there. There's no point filming it all again, so I'll carry on with this and do a little bit more film and remove most of it so you can actually see the proper shape of the Nautilus. I've just finished penning all the excess calcite off, and we've just basically run a small abrasive wheel over here to see what's what. As you can see, it's nearly back to its normal shape. One easy way of cleaning up the calcite quickly, if you're going to have a polish finish, is with either a Dremel or one of the quarter or suspension motors. It can be done quite easily with a 1/2 inch mandrel and abrasive. These come off, get it off. And little abrasive wheels, as you can see. Very effective and quite a cheap way of doing it if you haven't got the expensive air tools. We just need to grind this round a little bit and correct the shape a bit, but first of all we're going to remove some of this matrix here and finish shaping this bit down here. Then we'll come back to this at a later date. I should take my mask off. We've brought this matrix down a bit. It will probably go a bit more. Basically what I've got to decide next is what I'm going to do with this mouth border. I may take it back to clean it up a bit. It's just unfortunate that due to the state of the calcite on the shells we're not going to be able to leave an actual finish. But we'll just have to repair and polish them. Should still look quite nice, although some people don't like that sort of thing. There's not a lot else I can do with this really. As you can see, we've been working on this area. We've basically done something with the mouth border of the Nautilus, a small one, and basically all that's left with this now is just to correct the shape still a little bit more here and touch up this shell ready for polishing. We've trimmed a little bit around the back on the matrix. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a new tool. Introduce a new tool. It's basically a needle descaler or micro needle descaler, or sometimes called a texturing tool. What we're going to do with this is we're going to go over the background matrix and we're going to smooth it all out, and it gives almost a natural finish to the rock. It's a little bit noisy but very effective. I'll just give you a little demo. As you can see, that finishes it off nicely. It removes all your pen marks and basically leaves more of a natural finish on the matrix. All this piece of equipment is basically an arrow body that's been modified at the top, and it has quite a lot of small needles in the end which go in and out like a pen, basically vibrate a bit, but very effective. Okay, that seems to have worked quite well. One or two little bits of needle laying about from the needle descaler. I had to change the needles, that slowed me down a little bit, but only takes a few minutes, not really a problem. What I'm going to do next is just fill this little parts of this fissure. Quite simple to do. All I'm going to use is basically some super glue and some very fine dust. Now this dust is actually from the matrix. When you grind this, or you get any dust from your pens, if you collect it, then put it through a very fine sieve, you can get various grades of the rock. This is a very, very fine dust, and what we're basically going to do is we're just going to pour some super glue in there, if it's working, not blocked. There we go. While that's setting, just pour some dust in there as well with it. Just push it up a little bit. Almost there. That should do for now, I think. That's set for a day or so, then finish that off. You can always use this glue as well for filling small imperfections in the shells by putting a little blob on, letting it dry. It can then be wet and dried, and it will take out any imperfections, although you may not have a perfect colour match. What we're going to do to finish off today is I'm basically going to resin fill this area here. If you look at the shell, I've ground a little bit there and gone over it with some wet and dry so you can actually see the colours. It's basically multicoloured. Some of the white underlaying calcite is coming through in places, surrounded by a light brown calcite, and then you go into darker, a very dark, almost, well, it's a very dark blue, almost a grey in places. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to mix some basic clear resin and tint it slightly white. I'm going to put thin film over this area here. I'm then going to leave one or two high spots in it which will simulate the white coming through, and then I'm going to mix some slightly light brown, place that round the high white spots, and then we're going to mix some darker bluey grey and infill the rest of it. Then we're going to leave that for a few days to set. Then that can all be rubbed down. We won't get a perfect match. There's no way you can match this perfectly, but we'll do our best to do a repair that we can get away with. Right, we've mixed the resin. I haven't done a pure white, more of an off-white. So we can get some of this on. Stand it a little bit. I'll put some high spots in here and there. Don't matter how high they go. Just sand them down later. Very messy job. Always make sure that you do this in a well ventilated area. It's very fumey as well. Just a little bit of a lighter brown here. I'm just going to add parts of that in around here. Like icing a cake. It's like a chocolate cake. We'll leave that to set now, then we'll add a dark blue over the top. See how that goes. I've let this set for a little bit. I've trimmed it down with my Dremel, the drum sander, taken a lot of bits out here and there to deepen it in places so the grey will take more, creating pockets. What I'm basically going to do is I'm going to add this hardener now to the bluey grey mix, and we're going to complete the fill and then leave it. I think that'll about do it. Maybe a little, just a touch there. See, a few things have altered since we last looked at the block. I've actually worked on more on the mouth border of the medium sized Nautilus. I decided to cut back to reveal all the mouth. I thought it would look better in the long run. I've got the colours for the resin, and we've cut back this area of fill, and we've added some darker browns right up to black, and it just needs a couple of little bits doing more where I've marked here and here. I'm just going to let a little bit more darker brown in, I think, possibly a hint of black on the edge. It's not a perfect match, but it's good enough. You know, you can see it's a repair, yet it looks okay, which is what basically I'm aiming for. Unfortunately, the little juvenile that was in the middle, when I came to clean it, the bottom wasn't preserved. So, with it being in such a poor condition on the underneath, I've actually removed it from the matrix. Right, I think the next job really is to cut these two little bits of resin in. We're going to put in here and there. Then we're going to sand that down, smooth it out. Then the whole thing is going to have to be rubbed down with abrasive papers, wet and dries, and get it really smooth so we can polish it. Same with the medium Nautilus as well, that's going to have to be all cut back, wet and dried, some of the little imperfections filled. I just did a couple of minutes ago with glue that feels like it's gone off. So we'll get the drill out. I'm going to cut these little pockets in now with the Dremel, little diamond bit. What we're going to do is, where we want the colours solid, we'll cut down to about 1/16 of an inch, and where we want it to fade, we'll taper the edge upwards. So when you rub it down, the colour fades into the colour underneath. So we'll switch on. There we go with the resin, it's a nice brown look for it. Don't take much, not really, they're only small. Just going to darken a little bit of that and add some black to the middle. Okay, we'll let that harden for a few minutes. We're giving it a few minutes, the resin's gone off now. Good enough to sand anyway. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my quarter horse flexi drive motor with detachable hand pieces. You can change these for various bits. This is the normal chuck, bit with a normal chuck. They just clip on. Like so. Right, 1/2 inch drum sander. This is going to make a lot of mess. So here we go. Right, as you can see now, it's starting to blend in. A little bit better, a little bit more colour. What we're going to have to do now is hand finish this, which is going to take a little bit of time. We're going to get some wet and dry, and a little bit of water, and when I can find it, we're going to start wet and drying it. It's down here. There we go. This is a 180 grade. It's a little bit rougher. Normally, depending on the repair, if it's small, I'll probably start about 400, but a bit of water. I'm going to hand rub this down now completely. Get all the imperfections out. Then we're going to finally just touch up the edge, clean the matrix, ready for polishing. Just rub a little bit and you can This is what takes a lot of the time. Right, I've propped that up a minute. There's still a lot of rubbing down and work to go, but if you actually wet it, put a bit of water on it, you can get an idea what it will be like when it's all cleaned up and polished. The little green, well, the medium Nautilus has actually got quite a lot of calcite in it, quite large crystals as well. But it should look quite nice when it's done, I hope. Right, that's it so far. What I'm going to do over the rest of the week now is I'm going to eventually rub all this down and get it ready for polishing, and the smaller Nautilus as well. Then I'll start a bit more video in the week on polishing it, cleaning up the matrix, and hopefully it'll be done for next Sunday. I've just applied a little bit of polish just to see where all the flaws are. There's quite a few, so hopefully we'll sort them out in the week. Well, that's a little bit of a move around just so you can see the general layout, what it looks like. Welcome back again. As you can see, we've been doing a little bit of polishing to the large Nautilus, and also a little bit round here on the smaller one. There's many different ways of polishing, using wax, oils. There's all sorts of things you can do to polish. I've basically done this a very simple way that anybody can do, which is basically using two tools: an electric drill with a rag buffing wheel, and a Dremel or a quarter horse motor with the small felt polishing wheels. The medium I'm using is a white buffing stick, normally used for metals. I believe the white they use on aluminium, but you can get different colours and grades of this. There is a rouge or a red one. You really don't want to use that because it will actually stain. If you've got any light or white calcite, it will actually stain it red. You really need to use the lighter ones, and these do tend to polish a little bit better. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to polish this a little bit more around the top, just to show you how the wheel performs. The secret to polishing is to put a little bit of the soap on the wheel at a time, and do that quite often rather than a large amount of soap, because what will happen is then you'll get a build up of soap on the article you're polishing, and it can be quite difficult to get off afterwards. Right, we'll strike the drill up and crack on a bit. Right, as you can see, that's starting to come up quite nice now. The smaller pieces, or smaller areas where you can't get in with the big buffing wheel, then you would use your small Dremel or quarter horse. best usually as well to do the edges with the smaller diameter wheels. You'll not really get in properly with the large buffing wheel. The centres, you can change this type of felt wheel for a conical one. These are quite easily and readily available from model shops. This basically screws onto one of your mandrels. If you can find one, there's one. No, it isn't. No, it is. These just screw onto the mandrel, like so, and then you can get into the middles with them, like so. If there is any bits that you can't quite get at, then we're back to the old paraloid. High gloss paraloid. Very smelly, this stuff. It will actually paint over a polished surface, this, if you're quite close to a piece that has been polished, which you more than likely will be. It will cover it. And just apply that on like that. Just paint a little bit of that on. Sometimes I have to do this right a little bit around the edge, right close to the rock, where you can't quite get with your buffing wheel. But as you can see, it does paint on quite easily, and it will leave a gloss just to finish off the edges. The only thing remaining when these are completely polished is to actually get your texturing tool, or whatever, however you may have ground it, I don't know, power your texturing tool up and actually just go around the outside just to remove any of the buffing soap or mess that you've got on the matrix from the polishing. That'll clean up around the outsides of the Nautiluses. You can, these needles, you basically can rest them on the edge without causing any damage if you want to get close in. They'll rest on the edge here without marking it. The ones obviously you don't get the point on. And basically, we're about finished at that. I'm just going to polish a little bit more before I call it a day. There's not a lot really I can show you more than I have done.